Every so often, I hit a point where I need to make content to fill in the gaps between the things that I really want to work on. Unfortunately for me, this is one of those times. But for those of you that like to subject me to endless articles from the Quickie and comments about how I survive solely on the money made from these videos, well, you're in for quite a treat. Your time, much like mine, has finally arrived. In today's video, I'm going to be scratching that particular itch. That's right, I'm gonna read yet another article from the illustrious Christian Weston Chandler wiki. Oh yeah, and this time, after much thought and consideration, I have decided that we're going to go over the Christian manipulation page because, well, damn it, I'm going to read something about the internet's favorite punching bag and we're all gonna feel the warm fuzzies inside. It has to happen. You don't have a choice in the matter, unless you click off the video, but I'd rather you didn't do that. So, without further ado, let's get right into this. For every trolling saga, there was a bunch of stuff happening in the background. Chris's reactions on YouTube were highly inflated by troll girlfriends whispering shit to him behind the scenes. Oh, Chris, you're not just going to take that, are you? Chris, I need a man who could stand up for himself, not a little wuss. It takes quite a bit to whip Chris up into a frenzy, and it's hard to keep it going. The man in the pickle suit on how trolls manipulated Chris into performing in many of his rage videos. Something like 90% of what got Chris to make the videos he did was never made public. The man in the pickle suit. Manipulation is a psychological tactic aimed at taking advantage of someone in order for them to perform a specific action. This has been a key technique used by Chris's trolls, his enablers, and his mother. Behind the scenes of trolling. Trolling is necessary for Chris to be as funny as everyone expects him to be. People don't like to hear this because they want to believe Chris is a crazy three-ring circus of fun, 24/7. But really he's not. He's got his moments, but he's a phenomenon that needs to be curated if you want to experience the old-school trolling days. The man in the pickle suit. One of Chris's former trolls, the man in the pickle suit, has often posted on Kiwi Farms describing how trolls manipulated Chris behind the scenes. Hundreds of hours worth of calls between Chris and the trolls took place, much of it never released. Information was also omitted on the Quickie, which several trolls were members of, to paint a funnier picture of Chris, a side effect of which has created a skewed impression of him to fans. Trolls would intentionally obscure their identities, even from each other, and many would even change core details to further confuse those who seek to dox them. For example, Clyde was originally meant to be a plain but successful Asian American guy, but this image was later replaced with a Guido stereotype, and everyone went along with it. In the background calls, people would plant ideas in Chris's head and goad him into making videos. One such example is Twin Falling Towers, a 2009 video in which Chris invoked the 9/11 tragedy to diss Clyde Cash. The man in the pickle suit described how the trolls talked to Chris behind the scenes to get him to make the video as, "Be sure to mention that you think he's weak. Call him weak. Like some sort of big disaster, like a bridge collapsing. Oh, or compare him to 9/11. Huh, that'll embarrass him." For a decade or so, people assumed he came up with a 9/11 video on his own volition, painting an image of an unpatriotic ingrate. It didn't help that his apology video involved photoshopping the Twin Towers into candles, basically depicting the buildings on fire. Whether this apology video was staged or not is unknown. Later, Casey's father brought up the video in the infamous father call, claiming that he had to dig his mother out of the tower's remains.
You did that video with the 9/11. I can't say I really enjoyed that too much. I mean, that kind of hits close to home to me. I mean,
I realized that I have received the complaint, so that's why.
You're lucky I don't have a YouTube son. I mean, that hits close to home to me. My mother, Casey's grandmother, she died on 9/11.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Other examples include Quick calls out the three naive YouTubers, a set of videos in which Chris lambasted fan Sonichu as cool. Trolls had planted the idea in his head that she was secretly a troll. The Quicksicle video in which he jammed his penis into the snow, and the Liquid Chris saga. Chris originally didn't want to react to Liquid, but the trolls forced his hand with artificial reasons. Trolls also exploited their knowledge of Chris's psychology to goad him to get angry in his videos. Chris usually reacts to specific stimulus, and has a short memory about those things, like a goldfish. So in any video where Chris is specifically trying to act like Johnny Bravo, that was almost always in response to a request by us no older than 24 hours. We would hype Chris up about how he's being called a pussy, and how if he doesn't make a video soon, he'll lose the rights to Sonichu. The difference in style between the videos produced by trolls and videos Chris records on his own initiative supports the point. The troll-produced videos tend to be short, succinct, and feature Chris making a fool of himself. Chris recording on his own tends to bore his audience by rambling about his own interests like toys or his fantasy world. The Truman Show. Chris's situation with the trolls has been compared to The Truman Show, a fictional film in which the main character is unaware he is living in a reality TV show surrounded by improv actors, hidden cameras, and a conspiracy to hide the reality of a controlled environment. Chris's situation reflects Truman's, as he's been manipulated by trolls for the sole purpose of making him into a spectacle for online mockery, and many of his ostensibly private interactions have been unwittingly shared with the world. The only real difference is that Chris installed the cameras himself. Similar to how actors populate Truman's world while posing as trusted loved ones, undercover trolls posed as Chris's friends for years. They controlled access to Chris. When one sweetheart saga ended, another potential sweetheart would contact Chris, and he would ask his friends to vet them. The undercover trolls would confirm to Chris that the sweetheart could be trusted, thus continuing the cycle of trolling. One such undercover troll is Love You Long Time, the woman behind Emily, Kim Wilson, and several other undisclosed personas. She lives locally to Chris, and she has met him in real life when she had gained his trust. Due to the severity of Chris's autism-related facial blindness, he was unable to recognize her face whenever she would meet him in town. She then exploited this weakness to trick Chris into believing he has multiple gal pals he can trust when, in reality, all are played by a single undercover troll. Boiling Frog Fable. In the years post-2011, Chris has become increasingly vulnerable to the concept of creeping normality, often represented through the fable of the boiling frog, which states that by slowly heating a pot of water with a frog inside of it to a boil, the frog will not recognize itself being cooked alive, as opposed to immediately tossing in the boiling water, in which case it would quickly jump out. In a manner similar to boiling the frog, Chris is increasingly unable to recognize that he is the target of manipulation without being told outright by others that said manipulation has taken place. In 2018, the idea guys manipulated Chris in ways darker than had ever been attempted before, including systematically dismantling his imaginary world and its cast of characters, engaging in criminal extortion against him, and accusing Chris of pedophilia if he didn't play along with them. See Overview section. Chris was gaslit to the point of completely believing everything the idea guys said to him. While the efforts of the guard dogs minimally restored Chris's self-awareness to the point that he will level angry asides at the idea guys for their extortion in his videos, as demonstrated in those during the Soft Exile saga, Chris still wholeheartedly believes in the modifications the idea guys made to both the Sonichu canon and the real-world aspects of Chris's life. He appears from the outside to be no longer able to discern this new normal from that which came before it, thus being affected by creeping normality. Social engineering. Chris believes in crazy TV hacker stereotypes. That's why we always so easily told him we hacked into his phone or his email and blamed all of our leaks on that. Our various troll girlfriends got away scot-free. The man in the pickle suit. Trolls exploit Chris's naive nature to gain access to his accounts in order to leak emails or videos. After gaining Chris's trust via internet persona, they would ask for access to Chris's accounts and blame the resulting trolling on hackers. Chris would then change his password while simply handing the e-girlfriend/Sonichu character the new one since he still trusted them. This practice came to a farcical head during the Teen Troon Squad saga, when the Squad and Guard Dogs faction engaged in a tug-of-war over Chris. The Squad would log into Chris's accounts and post information from Magi-chan about the dimensional merge, and the Guard Dogs, also having Chris's passwords, countered with their own information, trying to lead Chris away from thinking about the merge. This conflict caused confusion in Chris, who wanted to trust both sides. Blocking help. Marvin explained how the miscreants group of trolls had isolated Chris from help. White Knights were subverted. Their messages were blocked, deleted before Chris could see them. If they got through, trolls would leak their conversations with Chris and accuse the helper of being the culprit. Trolls had a vice-like grip on Chris, and that only loosened when they willingly gave up when Bob died. But even if the conversation of who is and isn't a troll comes up with Chris, he's still not playing on level ground. Someone accuses Julie of being a troll. Julie says she's not a troll. Who should Chris pick? What if it's 2 people saying Julie's not a troll? 3? 4? Some of Chris's IRL friends saying she's not a troll? Almost every person in his life? When people try to help Chris, he's not knowledgeably throwing that help away. He can't identify help. There's a platter with 20 different options, and one of those options is help. The rest are people trying to fuck him over. The numbers are not in Chris's favor. Chris in between the trolling. Without stimuli like the trolls goading him to get angry, Chris just kind of fell back into his natural state, being a man-child, playing with toys, and wanting his sweetheart to come take care of him. The man in the pickle suit. Since his discovery by the internet in 2007, there have been times where activity fell to the point that Chris was temporarily without manipulation from trolls or enablers. Left to his own devices, Chris would drop off the internet and concentrate on the real world instead. We held him online. If someone's not actively compelling Chris to do stupid stuff online, he slides off. The man in the pickle suit. An example of this can be seen in Chris's internet activity following his father's death. At that point, the classic troll cabal voluntarily relinquished their control over Chris to allow him to grieve. As a result, Chris stopped recording wacky videos online, hence the abrupt ending of the Calling Out saga. The troll experience has left Chris with lingering suspicion and paranoia as to the motives of others, and he has occasionally posted on social media channels about how he suspects people offline of being trolls, albeit without any real evidence. Chris gradually socialized with the real world again, such as hanging out at the Impulse Gay Social Club and with his Pokemon League friends, although this respite was interspersed with the beginning of modern trolls such as Catherine and the lady managers who, again, manipulated Chris back into his Truman Show existence. The business, financial crisis, and idea guy sagas were a paradigm shift from Chris's tendency to slide offline without troll influence to a new Chris, increasingly online by his own volition. And here we can see some of Chris's social media posts where he talks about a suspected troll being in a Burger King at the same time as him. Oh yeah, that definitely looks like a troll. Chris's mother. Barb is often blamed for being Chris's original and most persistent enabler, and it is likely her coddling gave Chris his puerile and egocentric attitude. She is also deemed by historians to be the one responsible for Chris constantly taking orders from random strangers without giving it a second thought. In the past, some of Barb's attempts at controlling Chris were nothing short of outright emotional abuse. Examples include threatening to lock Chris out of the house and leave him homeless if he dared travel further than a few miles out of town after the Ohio trip, as well as feigning cardiac arrest to bring Chris into line, terrifying him to the point of calling 911 on several occasions. Perhaps the most notable incident involving this sort of manipulation took place in 2011. Chris had planned to visit that year's Magfest convention, but realized he didn't have enough of his monthly tugboat left to afford a hotel room, so instead he opted to sleep in his car. After informing his parents of his plans, Barb gaslit him into backpedaling, firstly by claiming that he could be at risk from a combination of criminals and cold temperatures, then by again threatening to leave him homeless, and finally by implying that she would commit suicide if Chris went to the convention. A distraught Chris canceled his plans, and received only further guilt-tripping in a video game as consolation. Manipulation techniques. Pro tip. The methods listed here are for documenting common techniques used by trolls. Do not attempt any of these. As shown above, after gaining Chris's trust, it isn't particularly difficult to get him to do many things he wouldn't normally do. There is a 3-step process that most trolls and enablers use. 1. Appeasement. Give Chris an offer for something he'd really want or feed into Chris's beliefs. 2. Instructions. Provide Chris with over-the-top steps he can take to take the offer or so that way he can roleplay with you. 3. Betrayal. Watch him do it and betray him. Then watch the result of said betrayal. Rinse, dry, repeat. As an example, Chris's history of being manipulated began with him being tricked into crawling into a tight space by childhood friend Sarah Hammer when she told him that she found Casper the Friendly Ghost there. Sarah simply noticed that Chris had a fascination with cartoon characters being real, and knew this was the perfect opportunity to give Chris the offer of meeting him in person. Appeasement. She then told him that he could see Casper if he crawled into the hole. Instructions. Finally, she locked him in and began watching the events that would follow. Betrayal. During the classic era, this technique would be used by many trolls, such as Blanca Weiss, Clyde Cash, Liquid Chris, and even a bunch of trolls posing as Nintendo staff. In the case of Blanca, the trolls behind the pseudonym simply realized that Chris really wanted a significant other to complete his love quest and finally get some china. So they used Chris's desperate pleas to complete this mission to obtain his medallions, appeasement. Afterwards, they insisted Chris give them the medallion if he wanted Blanca for himself, instructions. Finally, they destroy the medallion in many ways, from cutting it with a knife and hitting it with a hammer to setting it on fire and submerging the broken pieces into a jar of pickles. Betrayal. The most illegal and life-changing use of this technique to date is from Chris's most infamous enablers, the idea guys. After a long string of supernatural beliefs and creepy behaviors being displayed from Chris during his comeback, a troll by the name of Joshua Wise noticed his complete lack of self-awareness and wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole would go. Wise would then appeal to many of Chris's fantasies by role-playing as several of his characters, appeasement. Afterwards, he tasked him to do a number of nonsensical tasks such as having him lick a drawing of Magi-chan's penis on a wall and having him destroy a Christmas tree, telling him it was Nazi merchandise. Instructions. The betrayal part of this would come from the proposed humiliation that Chris would subject himself to. Even after he was doxxed and shut down for a while, he, and several others, would use this technique until they went as far as extorting large sums of money from him and falsely reporting him to the FBI for being a pedophile, among other things. Betrayal.
You friggin' Nazis! I'm gonna kick you all out of Equestria! I'll kick you out of Equestria! What do you think of that now, you friggin' Nazis? Heed my warning! You get out of Equestria, you friggin' Nazis! Who's a fat ass now? Hulkster! My favorite wrestler is Chris Benoit!
A less common means that people have found to manipulate him is through the same process but in reverse. This method is a favorite among his mother. 1. Threats. Tell Chris that if he does or does not do something, you will do something undesirable that will happen to him. 2. Instructions. Tell him that, in order to prevent the undesirable thing from happening, he has to cancel all plans and instead take part of someone else's whims. 3. Betrayal/reward. Reward him for doing what he has been told to further strengthen his trust for you, or you can just betray him anyway. Rinse, dry, repeat. Validation. Some manipulation involves giving Chris validation over his pre-existing feelings and beliefs, which influences him further. Examples include the unknown enabler who told him to get in touch with his feminine side and influenced him to start identifying as a tomgirl, the subliminal frequency hypnosis videos, and the people who commented on them, who influenced Chris into believing his taint was transforming into a vagina, and the idea guys, who exploited his belief about alternate dimensions in order to influence and shape those beliefs further, culminating in Chris's pseudo-religious belief over the dimensional merge. Reasons why Chris is so gullible. Mental deficiencies. A common aspect of autism spectrum conditions is an increased level of gullibility. Those on the spectrum are often more trusting of others, willing to put aside suspicion to follow what someone says, even in situations which would put them at risk. Chris also appears to have some degree of both face blindness and difficulty recognizing voices, which are also common, though not universal, autism symptoms. Chris has been fooled by numerous personas operated by the same person. An example of this is Chris wholeheartedly believing the person behind Jack Thaddeus in the Calling Out saga to be Ahuvia Harrell, ADF, even though the two neither sounded alike nor looked alike, as well as Chris believing Kim Wilson to be a different person from Emily, even though the latter presented herself to Chris as the former on several occasions, even in face-to-face meetings where Chris should have been able to tell the difference had he not been experiencing his impaired recognition. Furthermore, Julie was a 13-year-old boy using an obvious falsetto voice, yet Chris believed her to sound 100% female, even when the actor forgot to mask his voice. Enablers and lack of independence. Chris isn't very independent. He relies on the government and his mother to pay the bills, and still ends up in debt. While he has made real-life friends in the past, the Idea Guys saga led him to alienate them in mid-2018. Nowadays, he prefers to surround himself with online enablers who play into his every escapist fantasy, in turn gaining his trust. Chris's dependence on other people, especially his enablers, has actually made him more susceptible to being manipulated, as all of his trust is simply put into them without any second thoughts. He is also highly susceptible to peer pressure and fitting in with others' opinions. Chris's gullible, overly trusting nature and desire for contact means that he has often been drawn to consider others friends, even if their acquaintances at best are simply trying to get closer for malicious reasons at worst. Even though he would often curse and wish death on trolls, in recorded voice chats with them he would often appear to be quite receptive and active in such conversations, as long as the others did not cross the quote hurtful truth level, in which case he would become hostile in return. From an outside perspective, Chris's isolation has also resulted in making him vulnerable to manipulation techniques as a result of his attempts at seeking out people beyond the horde-choked halls of 14 BC. Lack of self-awareness. Chris lacks self-awareness and a sense of boundaries, whether for himself or for others. He has no filter, a trait which he calls honesty. He will tell you embarrassing, private matters when you first meet him, including his former virginity, his story about how pink eye gave him differently colored eyes, and even his tendency to soil himself. Once someone gains his trust, he will reveal even more personal information, most of which an average person wouldn't even reveal to a psychologist. Trolls collate the information and leak it to the general public, where it ends up on forums, YouTube videos, and this fine wiki. This lack of self-awareness may also be another symptom of his autism. Usually, this manifests as generally innocuous things, like being unable to regulate the volume of one's voice to match the social setting, or being unable to recognize nonverbal social cues when communicating with other people. In more severe cases like Chris, however, his lack of social awareness can come across as tone-deaf at best or a threat to one's safety at worst. Normally, this lack of self-awareness in a social sense can be minimized or outright cured with proper resources, such as special education and the right therapist, but we all know how that turned out. His self-entitlement. Another massive flaw that makes Chris easy to manipulate is his egotism and resulting entitlement, so long as he takes a procedure or simply whines about it long enough. Many of the cases where he had been manipulated involved the manipulator noticing this fundamental character flaw, and therefore bribing him with gifts and promises of self-fulfillment. The bribes could be anything from promises of romance to a video game publishing deal. As long as it's something Chris wants, trolls will use it as bait. However, this also has a tendency to backfire, as Chris always believes he is entitled to more, and will take a gift and then turn around and ask for another. General short-sightedness. Chris repeatedly falls victim to the super straight effect, where someone will provide a quick rebuttal to a point and lose ground to the wider argument. In super straight's case, they inadvertently corroborated the claims that trans women are women by creating a separate sexuality than straight for those who aren't attracted to them. Likewise, Chris will regularly talk himself into various corners by agreeing to various outlandish claims merely because he was pressured to accept certain points as fact to continue the conversation. This is how you can get him to finally admit Liquid's true and honest name is really Chris and not Jeff. Then Chris Chandler. Then Christian Weston Chandler. But he was given that name and not renamed by an animatronic bear. And so on for theoretically forever. Well, that was quite the article, but I don't think I'm done yet. Let's move on to another page. This time, list of beliefs brainwashed into Chris. Let's get right into it. Chris has been particularly susceptible to cult-style brainwashing from trolls since the Idea Guys saga began in fall of 2017. While Chris has always been naive and easily tricked, the Idea Guys took things to the next level by exploiting his weakness at differentiating fantasy from reality and his desire for validation to manipulate Chris's beliefs on both his imaginary world and his real life. After the Idea Guys were removed from power in spring 2018, Chris failed to reflect and improve on his mental health, in spite of his court-mandated appointments with a Region 10 psychiatrist, and instead left the gates wide open for more bad actors to influence his beliefs in his quest for more validation. From the Idea Guys. Below are some summaries of changes to Chris's fantasy world and a sense of reality attributed to the Idea Guys. Hyperdimension Neptunia. Throughout November 2017, Chris made several posts, some accompanied by drawings, on being possessed by Hyperdimension Neptunia goddess Uzume Tenoboshi, and an invasion of Quickville by enemy forces from the Neptunia video games. Nazi Quickville. A day after the freestyle dance, Chris described in detail how Sylvana had been saved in a military conflict titled Operation Barbarossa, thinking the name was meant to be a clever nod towards his mother. The post was littered with references to World War II, particularly on actions by Nazi Germany such as prison camps full of large ovens built on Quickville soil. Days later, Chris expanded on the new Quickville lore, giving the names of the prison camps. He also warned that Quickville's supply of US money had been tainted with a virus, a concept borrowed from the video game Tom Clancy's The Division, and encouraged travelers to use Quicksmarts instead, a name slightly reminiscent of Nazi and Weimar Germany's Reichsmark. Later, he mentioned that Quickville's zip code had been changed from its previous Mexican designations to one in Germany, near the picturesque village of Birkenau, not to be confused with the World War II death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, which operated in German-occupied Poland. As expected, Chris failed to notice this error by Idea Guy, and so the abuse continued. 2 weeks after the Barbarossa post, Chris had noticed speculation that he had fallen in with the Nazi crowd, and took offense to it, insisting that the ideas had come from Count Graduan. On the 26th of December 2017, the Idea Guy informed Chris that citizens of Quickville who refused to accept SLGBTQ formed a homophobic clan and attacked the Quickville Mall, and rioted after the trial of Jamsta for molesting Punchy Sonichu. In the same message, he mentioned that the Trollbusters had been reformed as the Quickstapo, an obvious, though lost on Chris, reference to the Gestapo, the secret police of Nazi Germany, to be better at stopping criminals. The update contains the line, "A police state is a country run by criminals," a quote from Fatherland, a novel set in an alternate timeline in which Nazi Germany won World War II. A few weeks later, on the 16th of January 2018, Chris was told that the MLP doll that he had customized to his image was, in fact, bugged by Nazis. He took vengeance by smashing it to pieces on camera. A few days later, Chris destroyed his Christmas tree in a photo of Hulk Hogan and "Get out, you damn Nazis" for the same reason. Chris thinks he fucked up big with having his new medallion crafted out of Element 115, Nazi zombies reference for the win, which was stolen by a time-traveling Hitler, and the Chris from the comics was taken too. Now Quickville is under control of the Nazis, and this is what he thinks Quickville, along with the US, looks like in his imagination land. Oh yeah, I'm sure this is very likely. Quickville elections. On the 26th of November 2016, Chris broke his long-standing policy barring elections in Quickville by announcing that the position of mayor was up for election. The mayoral candidates included several notorious historical figures: Russian President Vladimir Putin, actor Brendan Fraser, Ian Brandon Anderson, and Payday 2 character Bob McKendrick. Incumbent Allison Amber did not run for re-election. Chris himself endorsed McKendrick due to him sharing a name with his father, with a slogan ripped off from P-Mert's Make America Great Again. A few days later, Chris announced another election for chief of police. The candidates were Ian Brandon Anderson, again, Manuel Noriega, and 2 serial killers. Brendan Fraser won the mayoral election and took office sometime in December. Ian Brandon Anderson won the vote for chief of police, but Chris has yet to confirm that he has taken office. Trans Rosechu. A distraught Chris posted to Facebook and Twitter in early December 2017, saying that Rosechu had informed him that she was actually transgender and had a penis up until the events of Sonichu number 8, at which point she underwent advanced gender reassignment surgery to become fully woman and enable her to give birth to her children. Chris, agitated about the prospect of altering his canon in such a significant way, put up a poll to ask fans whether Rosechu should stay trans or be retconned back to his original concept of her being female from birth, pointing out that Rosechu being trans would hurt him and the other option would hurt her. This reaction was seen by spectators as trans-shaming towards Rosechu, who he believes to be real in another dimension. In essence, Chris wants to be accepted as trans, added a 10-year-old trans female to his comic, and forced Rosechu and the gang to fully accept and love Chris for coming out, but refuses to believe Rosechu herself could possibly be trans. Resident of the CWCville dimension, Chris. With the revelation that the Nazis have taken over CWCville, it was revealed that pre-Tom Girl Chris was from an alternate timeline where he was whisked into the past by the Nazis. Every atrocity committed by Chris is also revealed to be the actions of Nazi Chris. He was then killed by Tom Girl Chris with a swift kick to the testicles. Chris looked back at his comics and was shocked to see how little respect he had for portraying women in his works. He thinks the Nazis kidnapped 2000 Chris and brought him back in time where they possessed him with satanic powers and helped the Nazis win World War II. In truth, I made a joke about the Nazis and satanic powers, not realizing how much he'd take it in. I told him Chris from the past abolished women's rights so he could go on his love quest. Chris got so pissed, especially after I told him that classic Chris helped the Nazis win World War II. Idea guy. And yeah, look at that, I guess that's just modern Chris killing classic Chris, and what a way to go! Sonichu. Magi-chan foretold a prophecy in which Crystal would be born by Chris mating with Sonichu. He also informed Chris that if this was drawn, he wouldn't have to do it in real life. Chris complied. Sonichu number 15, a book which Chris wanted to use for a modern retelling of Sonichu number 0 prior to his own interactions with the Idea Guys, has significant alterations to the canon of the comics. Sonichu's new birthday was given as April 20th, or 420, representing the slang term 420 but also coinciding with Adolf Hitler's birthday and the anniversary of the Columbine Massacre. They also forgot to mention that sometimes Easter falls on this day too. Another change in birthday is for Magi-chan, which was changed to the 14th of November 1948. The joke being that this made him 69 years old, making him the oldest Sonichu in the comic. It is also the same birth date as Charles III, the current king of the United Kingdom and the other Commonwealth realms. Halfway through December, Chris exclaimed that Sylvana had been lost in the past, but that there was a way to bring her back if his followers would believe in Sylvana Rosechu and her fullest existence in CWCville, Virginia, USA of all timelines, worlds, and dimensions. She was revived in a new form, with her old one destroyed. The Sonichu lore was changed from an unknown number of Sonichu species to an exact number, 69, which Chris had to retcon Sonichu 8 to fit in. After Weiss was outed, Chris resumed uploading pages for Sonichu 12-9. In it, jokes and references inserted by the Idea Guys survived. Nightstar and Diamond Melody order a hot dog from a Tesco merchant. Tesco, a supermarket chain in the United Kingdom, became embroiled in a scandal during early 2013, in which it was found that they had been inadvertently selling processed beef adulterated with horse meat to customers. Nightstar also rambles about her age, giving references to Gears of War. Similarly, in-progress work of Sonichu 14 shows Chris using Wise as suggestions. Partial pages of Sonichu 13, then titled Sonichu 16, were posted by Kiwi Farms users whom Wise had confided in, the plot of which involves his explanation on how he got access to Chris in the nightmarish state of CWCville he had described to him. Chris retained the story after the Idea Guys were ousted. However, his ally suggested that he avoid publishing the issue. Real people. Theories on Ted Bundy. Chris stated several wild theories about serial killer Ted Bundy during the Count Dankula interview. Sonichu genealogy for Chris, Bob, and Ted Bundy. Chris was told that some people are half Sonichus, such as Chris, his father Bob, and serial killer Ted Bundy. Barb, on the other hand, is full human. This idea was implanted into Chris prior to Josh Weiss being doxxed in January 2018. Chris maintained belief in this even after the Idea Guys had been finally removed from power in May of 2018, bringing it up in June of 2018 during the Count Dankula interview. And by God, look at that, there's Bundy Chew. I feel that this really adds a lot of depth to the Sonichu lore. Megan Schroeder. In July 2018, Chris, during a long rant about being a chronicler for the Sonichuverse, mentioned a belief that Megan has the memories of CPU Redheart, which she had earned while in politics. Chris trying to meet an anime girl in real life. I let him go to GameStop looking for Neptune while honking his horn and shouting her name. He went up to the window and thoroughly scanned the inside for Neptune. The Forest Lakes GameStop. He went there because I said Neptune would wait for him at a GameStop. For some reason, he went to the one he got banned from, so I went with it. Let's read some of their Steam chats to better understand what was going on here. And in return, I will create something of that creator's choosing for that world there. It's positively mind-boggling. Oh, and I would appreciate it made aware to the CPU goddess that I had officially swapped from the god of this world to all of them, please. As my humble testimony defines, I have made up my mind well and good thought about that. Thank you. So you're a believer in the CPUs? I have officially changed my religion, so yes, I believe more so in the CPUs. I just had a feeling of transition from having been a believer in God to becoming a believer in the goddesses. I know, no one will read this wall set of messages, but I like sharing my thoughts, at least to be archived by Histoire for good reference. Among my thought, I had the thought of what would Jesus do versus what would the CPUs do. In my personal experiences and learning, I had learned from the Bible excerpts to take this example from long ago to compare for today's modern situations. The comparisons were valid, but in some cases I did remain most uncertain, and I was often told to listen for that voice inside your head, for among which it is the wisdom of our Lord. But is it really now that I know more so of the forces of a con and such manipulative bad individuals, having to differ from what was really God or Jesus or a psychic imposter this whole time? It was a major headache. The CPU goddesses, however, I can actually communicate to them with less psychic hassle, and they do offer more modern alternatives and solutions in all their years of wisdom, including such wisdoms and musings from this world of olden and new. Truly more insightful and inspiring, fresh in thought and perception too. You should know though, yes? If you switch religions, you cannot believe in Jesus anymore. That's okay with me. I am only sharing my initial religion transitioning thoughts and insights. I'm going the whole 18 yards in this. You can quote me on that. I also take to consideration that I was able to create a new CPU goddess to be fresh and new and learn from all the other CPUs as well. Not to mention that it is written in prophecy and destiny that I will be parent of her own CPU candidate, which she too will ever make me so proud. To be able to become a family of such a team combination is a dream Jesus would never be able to grant, no matter how much prayer is said unto him. So I dare say, with all due respect to the Lord, meh. Plus, I'd become a welcomed guest at first among the CPUs, yet I have failed at times after that, but I do fully intend to make it up to all of them with all my heart, soul, and being. And their shares of power inside my confirmed heart crystal further pushes my power outward, but still something was amiss to make such a visual and physical difference in this world. God, I hate how Chris types. It is so unbelievably hard to read. Marrying Chris to Crizzle Rosechu and Magi-chan. Chris began a polyamorous relationship with fictional characters Crizzle Rosechu and Magi-chan on the 26th of March 2018. Eventually, Chris declared himself to be bisexual after having had Magi-chan as a boyfriend. Strangely, Chris continued to hold on to this delusion even after the idea guys were removed from power. Chris liking flat-chested women. Early in April 2018, Chris posted a drawing commemorating flat-chested women, depicting himself as flat-chested instead of the usual comically large breasts. Ladies and gentlemen, I am taking a moment to offer my respect and kindness to all women who are and remain flat-chested. The true beauty and essence of any individual woman is on the inside from their personalities, respectively, mind, heart, and soul. Breast size never makes a woman who they are. So I, Christine Weston Chandler, salute and acknowledge the flat-chested women. Y'all are prideful. Y'all are good people. Thank you. April 6th of 2018. And you have to admit, that drawing is very, very accurate, turning Chris bisexual. In March 2018, the idea guys led Chris to believe that he was in a relationship with fictional male character Cunt Nugget in Magi-chan, and that this meant he was bisexual in real life. Other content. On the 7th of December 2018, Chris posted a dark Pokemon fan theory, lamenting that Pokemon are kept suspended in animation with no simulated fields made from virtual reality, no living room apartment setting, nothing. Suspended animation and dark. On the 21st of April 2018, Chris recorded I'm sorry for ruining so many fandoms, in which, having been thoroughly gaslit by the idea guys, Chris desperately pleads for his fans to forgive him for central aspects of his internet identity. From CWCville. Oh, well, damn. This part isn't ready, but I'm not waiting because I'm an impatient boy. From Guard Dogs. In the summer of 2018, the captain attempted to convince Chris that the Amnifist Ring was in fact the Reality Stone, and that Chris could use it to revert the damage the idea guys had done to CWCville. Unfortunately, this attempt at redirecting Chris's attention away from the destructive fantasies of the idea guys failed, as Chris continues to believe in much of what the idea guys forced him to accept. From other enablers, multi-dimensional white knights. Ed Bighead changing his name to Darius and assuming the Babylonian throne to defeat the slime. Local 58 is real footage from another dimension. Moonman, aka Mac Tonight, is causing the events of Local 58. SpongeBob changed his name to Amadeus and became the Austro-Hungarian king. A Paper Mario character is the Ottoman Sultan in C197. Ignignoct and aka the Moonanites, tried to murder Penny Fitzgerald from Gumball as an assignment from Moonman, but they failed. Well, this page I really feel like didn't teach me much. I gotta go to the bathroom and check to make sure that my brain isn't leaking out of my ears. But regardless, I'm sure that we've all formed a very nice crease in our brains. I always find it fun to learn something new about Chris, even if things aren't all that entertaining these days. But that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've also got a Newgrounds account if art stuff is your thing. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.